In this column, we're in analysis. In this column, we're in design. In this column, we're in coding. In this column, we're in testing. In this column, we're in hardening. In this column, we're in releasing.
Oh, geez.
That's a Kanban, but it's not very agile.
Hello, everyone. It's Agile Peter and at Agile Bob. We are the two dudes that are going to be talking with you about Real Agile or BS in today's episode. And we're taking on a different framework under the Agile umbrella of sorts. It's Kanban. And so many of you guys might not know what Kanban is, but I'll give Bob the opportunity to give us a little bit of a synopsis here. But the question obviously is Kanban Real Agile or is it BS? Bob, take it away.
Wow. Okay. So Peter, I think Kanban can be described in a lot of different ways. I think the easiest way to describe it is to say it's a way to track work through a system. And Kanban technically means card or something like that. And it's moving cards through a system so you can see where work is at any moment in time. And the concept of Kanban is extraordinarily simple. Obviously, you have a Kanban, well, not obviously, but you would have a Kanban board with different columns representing different states for the work, and the cards representing the work would move through those columns. So that's my overly simplistic definition. Is that what we're going to use for Kanban, or do you want to add to that?
No, that's perfect. Kanban is a visual representation of the flow of work, and generally how I say it. And there are obviously facets to it. These facets are far more lightweight than Scrum, right? You have things like cycle time, work in progress, flow through the system, these types of things. So Kanban is a different framework, different from Scrum, but it's a more lightweight framework, but essentially it's a visual representation of the work going through the system. I think that we can sit on that definition for this one.
Okay, so in this case, I think that my answer, as it's been in a few times in the past, is going to be a little bit dependent on context. Kanban can be very agile. We use Kanban boards within Scrum to represent the state of the sprint. So that can be very agile. When it stops being agile is when you're not using Kanban effectively. You're not limiting work in progress. You're not actually doing those things that Kanban says you should do. You're not using it to improve the system. That's another thing that Kanban says you should do. And my personal favorite is when you simply take your waterfall system and put it on a Kanban board. In this column, we're in analysis. In this column, we're in design. In this column, we're in coding. In this column, we're in testing. In this column, we're in hardening. In this column, we're in releasing.
Oh, geez.
That's a Kanban, but it's not very agile. So I think if we're focused on cycle time, if we're focused on improving flow, if we're focused on improving the project or process, if we're focused on limiting work in progress, if we're doing Kanban to the fullest extent of Kanban, then yes, very agile. If not, total BS, and all it is an excuse to make it look like you're agile. How about you, Peter? What do you think?
I would agree with that. Kanban is one of those frameworks, and whenever anyone, let me qualify it this way. When anyone ever asks me like, hey, should we use Kanban? My first question in response is, are you doing Scrum well? Because in my opinion, and this is just through my experience, my heuristics, right, my historicity, I have found that companies who go to Kanban that have not mastered Scrum are at far higher risk of failing. And the reason I say this is because Scrum essentially has, depending on how you count it, about 10 to 12 or 13 constructs. You have the ceremonies, you have the artifacts, you have the entities, the actors in Scrum. So about 10 to 13, depending on how you count it. Kanban is an even lighter framework. It only has about 4 or 5 constructs to it. And the reason I say that there's higher risk of going to Kanban if you haven't mastered Scrum is because there's less facets to that framework. You have better opportunities to inherit dysfunctions from your organization. What I love so much about Scrum, and this is not going to be me on a pedestal, talking about the awesomeness of Scrum, but what makes Scrum so great are the disciplines that come along with it, right? The sprints, the cadences, the definition of done, the working agreements. The actors are very well understood and and they have very specific roles to it. If you can do Scrum effectively well, then you can mature, I like to say, into Kanban, an even lighter framework, because you've already had those enterprise and company disciplines instilled. my risk to many companies, or my guidance to many companies, is if you haven't mastered Scrum, you're probably going to be even less effective at Kanban, because there's less ideas, there's less artifacts, there's less kind of mechanisms to it, and we can kind of just inherit, just like you said, like with waterfall. Hey, we're agile now. We have a Kanban board that's showing our flow of work. That's not agile at all. And so that's generally my guidance: is master Scrum. If you could do Scrum effectively well, with excellence, and your teams are humming along, and if they feel like they want to mature to something a little bit less more lightweight, then yeah, take a look at Kanban. It's an opportunity to really focus on flow, work in progress, and cycle time, which are different metrics that we measure that are different from Scrum. So that's generally my guidance, is that if you can't do Scrum well, don't do Kanban. But if you want to do Kanban, make sure that you're really good at Scrum first.
Yeah, I think that I would go along with that. And one of the things I tell teams is, the thing about Scrum that I like for starting teams is its focus on done, getting things to done every sprint. I think if you go straight into Kanban and you don't have that discipline of getting things to done, you tend to let things languish for a while. So I like that particular discipline of Scrum. And then you can mature, as you said, into using Kanban, because you already have that discipline of things should be getting to done, like we're kind of focusing on cycle time. There's one other condition where I say that you could use Kanban instead of Scrum pretty much right away. And that is a very disruptive environment. So in an environment where you're very interruptive, like a support type of environment, you can't plan the work. There's not enough plannable work for Scrum to be effective. So every sprint you go in and say, well, we're going to try to do these two things, but it depends on what happens through support.
Right.
That kind of environment, I would say, is more suited to a Kanban with swim lanes for expedites and things like that. And these are all technical terms for people, but you can find them on the web. But I think a Kanban board set up for a support type of organization, or a very interrupt-driven type of organization, makes sense. I think Scrum makes sense when you have at least half of your work that can be plannable every sprint. So that's kind of my dividing line. If it can be more than half plannable, use Scrum right away. If it's less than half plannable, you're probably better off trying to use Kanban right away, just because it's going to be frustrating to use Scrum and just continuously miss your forecast because things happen you didn't expect.
And that really plays into something that we at Agile for All are really, we really emphasize with our clients and our students, is the Cynefin framework of understanding simple problems versus complicated problems versus complex and chaotic problems. And so the whole idea here is to ensure that you're addressing the right problem with the right model, right? So one of the biggest issues with most companies is they're attacking complex problems using a complicated mindset, assuming that we can plan everything out, which would be a simple example there. Kanban, likewise, is well suited. I like the way he said this: interrupt-driven development, right? Sustainment, maintenance teams where they don't know what the work is going to be for the day. They're getting bugs and fixes and these types of things constantly. And so Kanban really works effectively well there. And so we're using the right framework and the right tools for the right problem. So once again, for everyone out there, you really have to kind of dig in a little bit to what these frameworks can bring to your organization in terms of benefits, and you want to use the right framework for the right problems. So Scrum works really well when there is some ability to break stuff down, have some semblance of planning that you can put into iterations, where Kanban is a great mechanism and a great framework for where there are a lot more unknowns and there's injections of change randomly throughout the day. So again, making sure that you use the right models for the right problems is really, really important there. Any last words?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Peter, that Kanban is one of the few Agile frameworks in use today that was actually created after the Agile Manifesto. David Anderson didn't come up with Kanban really until 2005. Now, it's based on historically older things from Toyota Production System and stuff like that, but it was really codified around 2005. And he did a great job. I think that Kanban is very useful in a lot of situations, and my only concern is choosing the right situation to use it because it's the right thing to do, and not because it seems like an excuse to do something different and easier.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I think we're at an accord here. Is Kanban real Agile or BS? It is real Agile, but the caveat here is to make sure that you use the right framework, the right tools for the right problem at hand. If you want more information on Kanban or Scrum, let us know. We're always willing and open to answer any of your questions and or help you guys out in deploying frameworks into your organization or maybe even your personal life. Thanks again, guys, for joining us for this episode of Real Agile or BS. Make sure that you subscribe, you smash the like button, and we'll see you guys next time.